Imagine a night, tens of thousands of years ago. No lights, no sound except wind and the crackle of burning wood. A small group huddles around a fire, not for fun, but because the alternative is freezing to death in the dark. And in that firelight, something invisible is happening. Smoke is drifting into their lungs, night after night, for generation after generation. Nobody planned this. Nobody chose it. It was simply the price of staying warm and staying fed. But somewhere in that endless repetition, something shifted. Someone noticed that the smoke didn't just sting the eyes. Sometimes, depending on what was burning, it made them feel strange, lighter, calmer, occasionally euphoric. This is where our story really begins. Not with a cigarette, not with a ceremony, but with an accident so old it predates language itself. Let's rewind further. The earliest solid proof that our ancestors controlled fire comes from a cave in South Africa, and it's roughly 1 million years old. At that point, we weren't even the species we are now. We were an earlier, heavier-browed cousin called Homo erectus. They didn't smoke on purpose. They just sat near flames because flames meant survival. But here's the part textbooks skip. Burning plants doesn't only produce heat, it releases chemical compounds, some of them capable of interacting directly with the human brain. Certain plants, when they burn, release substances that our nervous system is oddly well equipped to recognize. Our brains, it turns out, already had the receptors waiting. So when early humans inhaled smoke from the right plant at the right time, their bodies didn't panic. They responded. And that response might be the true starting point of every ritual, every remedy, and every bad habit that came after. Not a decision, but a coincidence someone eventually decided to repeat. That's where we're going in this video. From an accidental campfire high to sacred smoke ceremonies, to a modern industry built on addiction. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about proof. Because ancient humans probably got high by accident is a fun theory, but archaeology needs something harder than a fun theory. The clearest, earliest physical evidence of deliberate cannabis smoking comes from a burial site high in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia. It dates back about 2,500 years to around 500 BC. Excavators uncovered small wooden burners filled with stones that had clearly been heated to extreme temperatures. Around those stones, they found the chemical remains of cannabis, not the low-potency wild variety used for rope or textiles, but a strain unusually rich in the compound, responsible for its psychoactive effects. This wasn't accidental. Someone selected this plant. Someone placed it in a burial, a moment reserved for the most meaningful rituals a culture has. That's not a campfire mishap. That's intention. Preserved in ash for 2,500 years. But here's a question worth sitting with. Just because our oldest evidence is 2,500 years old doesn't mean the behavior itself is only 2,500 years old. Seeds rot. Leaves decompose. A wooden pipe crumbles into soil within a few centuries. We only have Stone Age tools from millions of years ago because stone survives. Smoke and dried plant matter almost never do. So, when we say the oldest evidence, we should really be saying the oldest evidence that happened to survive. Absence of proof isn't proof of absence. It might just mean archaeologists haven't dug in the right place yet. Or the evidence simply rotted away before anyone got the chance to find it. Now here's where the story gets a genuinely good twist. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus, writing around the 5th century BC, described a nomadic people called the Scythians, doing something that, for centuries, historians assumed he'd exaggerated. According to Herodotus, the Scythians built small enclosed tents, heated stones inside them, then threw hemp seeds directly onto those glowing stones. They'd sit inside, breathing in the resulting smoke, and, in his words, cry out in sheer enjoyment. For a long time, scholars treated this as ancient exaggeration. Then archaeologists actually dug into Scythian burial mounds, and they found exactly what Herodotus described: bronze fire pots, heat-scorched stones, and hemp residue. He hadn't invented a single detail. If anything, his account undersold what was actually happening. This is the moment where the story stops being "maybe ancient people smoked" and becomes "we have physical proof in multiple independent locations that they absolutely did, deliberately, ritually, and with real cultural weight behind it." Let's cross an ocean, because the next chapter of this story doesn't happen in Asia or Europe. It happens on the other side of the planet, in a place none of those ancient smokers even knew existed. Tobacco comes from a plant family called Nicotiana, and it's native to the Americas. Before 1492, nobody in Europe, Africa, or Asia had ever seen it, smelled it, or heard of it. It simply didn't exist in their world. Then Columbus landed in the Caribbean, and his crew noticed something bizarre. Local people were walking around holding small glowing rolled leaves, breathing in the smoke, and letting it drift back out through their nose and mouth. Columbus wrote about it in his own journal, men and women doing this openly, calmly, like it was the most normal thing in the world. His sailors were confused. Then, within weeks, they tried it themselves. Some habits cross cultures faster than languages do, but tobacco in the Americas is far older than 1492. Chemical traces in ancient pipes push its use back at least 3,500 years, found in what's now the southeastern United States. Some researchers think cultivation could stretch back 10,000 years or more, tracing to the Amazon basin. And here's the part that really changes how we should think about all of this. In the Americas, tobacco wasn't casual. It wasn't recreational. It was sacred. It was used to heal the sick, to communicate with spirits, to seal agreements between tribes. When a shaman blew smoke over someone, that wasn't a smoke break. It was considered an act of connection between the physical world and something beyond it. The smoke itself was treated as a messenger, carrying prayers up and bringing visions back down. That's why, for thousands of years, tobacco use in many indigenous cultures was disciplined and ritualized. You don't casually use something you consider sacred. The idea of smoking as a lunchtime habit, something you do waiting for a bus, is a European invention, and a very recent one at that. Now here's a discovery that rarely makes it into this conversation. In 2019, researchers working in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah found something remarkable: a hearth roughly 12,000 years old, containing seeds from a wild tobacco species native to North America. These weren't seeds that blew in by accident. Their concentration suggested they'd been placed there on purpose. This site is older than any known pipe or smoking artifact in the entire region, by thousands of years, which raises an enormous question. If people in Utah were putting tobacco into fire 12,000 years ago, what were people in Africa, Asia, and Europe doing with their own local plants at exactly the same time? Because the drive to seek altered states of consciousness isn't an American story, it's a human one. Let's talk about something that almost never comes up: smoking as medicine. Long before anyone smoked for pleasure or ritual, some ancient cultures smoked to heal. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts in existence, comes from ancient Egypt around 1550 BC. It describes inhaling smoke from heated herbs specifically to treat problems with the throat and lungs. That sounds backwards to modern ears, treating lung problems by inhaling smoke. But some of the herbs they used, including henbane, genuinely do have pharmacological effects when inhaled. The ancient Greeks did something similar. Hippocrates, the same figure doctors still reference today, wrote about using herbal vapors to treat lung disease and other conditions. The logic wasn't crazy for its time. The lungs absorb things quickly. If a plant has medicinal properties, sending it straight into the lungs through smoke was, for ancient physicians, a reasonable delivery method. We still use that same basic idea today, just without the fire. Inhalers, nebulizers, anesthetic gases. The method survived. The burning part didn't. In ancient India, Ayurvedic medicine developed a practice called dhumapana, literally smoke drinking, involving specific herbs, specific conditions, and detailed protocols refined over centuries. This wasn't guesswork. It was medicine, built the only way medicine could be built before modern science existed, through repeated observation and trial. Now here's a different angle entirely, the social one. Humans survived by staying in groups, and group trust was often the difference between living and dying. Shared rituals, including shared use of psychoactive smoke, created a kind of bonding that's hard to replicate any other way. Modern neuroscience actually backs this up. When people go through an intense shared experience together, their brain activity synchronizes, trust deepens, group identity strengthens. So when ancient people sat together in an enclosed space, breathing the same smoke, entering the same altered state together, that wasn't just a party. That was social infrastructure. It built the kind of trust that let people face danger together and come back alive. And then comes the part of this story that's genuinely hard to sit with. When tobacco reached Europe in the 1500s, it spread with incredible speed. Within a couple of centuries, it went from exotic curiosity to continental habit, then global commodity. By the early 1900s, the machine-rolled cigarette had arrived. Cheaper, more convenient, and more addictive than anything before it. What indigenous cultures had spent thousands of years treating as sacred and disciplined, European industry compressed into a mass-market product within a few centuries. And through the 20th century, tobacco companies spent decades and billions of dollars burying evidence their own scientists had gathered, that cigarettes caused cancer. They marketed to children. They engineered nicotine delivery to be as addictive as chemically possible. A shaman placing cannabis on heated stones in 500 BC, and a tobacco executive signing off on a 1960s ad campaign, both worked with smoke. That's nearly the only thing they had in common. So, when did humans start smoking? Honestly, we don't know exactly, and we probably never will. Solid physical evidence takes us back about 12,000 years, with reasonable speculation pushing further. But the underlying drive, the desire to alter consciousness, to bond through shared ritual, to use smoke as medicine, is almost certainly older than any artifact we've dug up. It might be as old as fire itself. What we do know is this: by the time any civilization started writing things down, people everywhere were already finding ways to breathe in smoke on purpose. The plants changed, the reasons changed, the rituals changed, but the behavior itself was already ancient. There's something quietly striking about that. Across everything that separates us from our ancestors, technology, medicine, everything we've built, there's this one thin thread running back tens of thousands of years: fire, smoke, breath. Next time you're near a fire or catch a whiff of wood smoke on a cold night, you're touching something far older than you probably realized.